During a live congressional hearing, Karoline Leavitt muttered something under her breath. "Go back to Africa." She didn't realize her microphone was still on. But it was Representative Jasmine Crockett's composed response that left the entire room silent and the nation watching closely. Inside the Kansas state capitol, the air felt dry and heavy with anticipation. The quiet shuffle of papers, the clicks of pens, and hushed whispers signaled a panel that had gone on too long and had become increasingly personal. The tension in the room clung to everyone like static. The congressional subcommittee hearing on education policy had entered its third hour. Frustration was beginning to show. Representative Jasmine Crockett, dressed in a striking blue blazer, had remained silent through most of the recent exchanges, not due to a lack of thoughts, but because she was waiting for the right moment. She always did. Opposite her sat Karoline Leavitt, once a familiar face on morning political shows and now serving as a senior aide involved in shaping federal education reform. Known for her sharp rhetoric and assertiveness, today she appeared uneasy, defensive even. Being questioned, especially by a confident black woman, clearly unsettled her. When Jasmine finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "So what you're implying," she said, locking eyes with Carolyn, "is that schools and underserved communities just aren't trying hard enough?" Carolyn crossed her arms and shifted slightly. "I'm saying we have to apply standards consistently. No exceptions." "But the playing field was never equal," Jasmine replied. Her tone measured. "We can't talk about fairness without considering access. Context and history matter." Carolyn let out a quiet scoff. She leaned subtly to her left close, enough to her mic, and muttered a phrase that wasn't meant to be public, but came through clearly. "She should just go back to Africa." A stunned silence followed. Someone coughed. A sheet of paper rustled. Somewhere in the back, someone's throat tightened. At first, the words didn't seem to land until a black intern at the media table froze and slowly turned his head toward the speakers. CSPAN's live broadcast caught every moment. Some attendees looked to Jasmine as if expecting her to rise, leave, or call out the remark. But she didn't. She kept her hands clasped, blinked slowly, and waited. The subcommittee chair, a senior congressman from Idaho, cleared his throat. "Let's stay on topic." "Please." Carolyn remained still. She reached for her water bottle, took a sip, and acted as if nothing had happened, but her ears were flushed. That's when she realized the mic had picked it up. Inside, the clip was already being trimmed and captioned. Jasmine turned to look at her. Not upset, not hurt, just steady. It was the kind of look that said, "You think you've harmed me, but all you've done is reveal yourself." Still, she didn't speak. She turned back to her notepad, jotted down a single note, and let the session continue as usual. That moment, just 10 seconds, spoke louder than any speech could. But silence doesn't stay quiet for long, not when a microphone is live and the whole country is tuned in. The clip hit the internet, bore the panel even wrapped up. Someone in the press box had recorded it on their phone, zooming in on Caroline's face just as the words left her lips. Within 20 minutes, "Go back to Africa" was trending across the country. Hashtags surged. Memes flooded in. The original video was reposted, captioned, "Slowed down," picked apart and debated from every angle. Caroline's team knew it was a serious moment. They exited the chamber. Her aide, a young man in a charcoal suit named Brian, hurried alongside her. "We need to say it was misheard," he whispered, blocking her from the cameras gathering at the hallway's end. "I mumbled." Carolyn replied, not slowing down, "No one knows exactly what I said." But she was mistaken. People did know. It was too distinct, too sharp, too loaded. You could hear it in how she said back, the pause, the annoyance, the dismissive tone behind it. They slipped into a staff hallway. Carolyn pulled out her phone, already buzzing with message from OIs and party members. Some were angry, some offered warnings, none offered support. Statement had to go out fast. By the time the press team released the first version, it read, "Ms. Leavitt was misquoted due to background noise and misinterpretation. She remains strongly opposed to all forms of racism and bias." But the public had already made up its mind. People weren't just angry, they were let down, not only because of what was said, But because it was yet another instance in a long, familiar cycle, a harmful comment followed by excuses, spin, and vague apologies. The public was exhausted. They had seen this story too many times. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett stayed silent. Reporters followed her to the elevator. One asked, "Congresswoman, do you have a responsado Ms. Leavitt's comment?" She looked at them, pressed the elevator button, and answered plainly, "Not yet." That "yet" stirred something. Her supporters called it composed and thoughtful. Her critics called it carefully staged. At a quiet cafe near the Capitol, 3 staffers from another representative's office huddled around a laptop, watching the clip again. One, a tired-looking white man in his 50s, rubbed his temples. "This is going to explode," he muttered. "If she talks, it'll be everywhere." "She will," the younger staffer said. "She has to." But Jasmine wasn't rushing. That night, she stayed at her hotel, far from the spotlight, sharing dinner with her mother, who had flown in from Texarkana the day before. They sat mostly in silence. Then her mother said, "You're going to say something, baby." Jasmine looked out the window, watching the city lights flicker beneath a cloudy sky. "Yeah," she said, but this wasn't what anyone had expected. Somewhere else, Carolyn couldn't sleep. She sat on her hotel bed, laptop open, watching the same news clip play on repeat. Her phone buzzed constantly, missed calls from party donors and former colleagues. People were already distancing themselves. Some advised her to lie low. Others pushed for a formal apology, but Carolyn wasn't built for backing down. "Not yet." "She misunderstood me," she muttered again, mostly to herself. Brian, sitting across the room, stayed silent. He didn't look angry, just deeply concerned. This wasn't only about Caroline's career anymore. It was bigger than either of them, and she was starting to realize she no longer controlled the story. Power often changes hands when no one sees it coming, and Jasmine was about to take it completely unexpectedly. The next morning, the Capitol cafeteria was unusually quiet. TV cameras filled the hallway outside the press room, their cords winding across the floor like vines. Reporters drank burnt coffee, eyes glued to their phones. Something was coming. They could feel it. At exactly 10 a.m., Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett approached the podium. She was alone, no entourage, no flag backdrop, no speechwriters waiting nearby. Just her, holding a plain black folder and that same composed calm she'd shown in the chamber the day before. Cameras clicked as she reached the mic. She paused, not too long, just enough to gather attention. Then she opened the folder, glanced at it once, and shut it. "I had something written," she said, "but I don't think I need it." She leaned into the mic slightly. "What happened yesterday didn't surprise me." Her voice was steady, not emotional, not performative, just clear and firm. "I've been told to go back since I was a teenager, standing in line at a store in Shreveport. That time, it was an older woman who didn't like the way I looked her in the eye. I've heard it on flights, heard it whispered in elevators, even heard it in boardrooms, though said more politely. So no, I wasn't surprised." She paused. A few reporters shifted in their seats. "What did surprise me," she went on, "was how shocked people were. Like this was the first time something like this ever slipped out, like it was a rare, unfortunate mistake in a society that usually runs on respect, but that's not the country I've known." The room was still, no more camera clicks, no interruptions. "I want people to really understand this," she said. "When someone tells you to go back, they're not questioning your passport. They're questioning whether you belong at all, your value, your right to be here." She looked straight into the lens. "And I'm not going anywhere." That was the line, the one that shot across 1,000 screens before the event even ended. It struck chords in classrooms, in barbershops, on porches in towns where Jasmine Crockett was still a new name, but where that voice, that strength was instantly familiar. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She simply shared her truth. "One year, my father took me to D.C. We stood outside the Supreme Court. He told me, 'This building belongs to you too.' I was 11. I didn't believe him. Even now, there are days I still don't." She exhaled. "But I came anyway. I ran for office anyway. I take up space here anyway. Not because I was invited, but because I never needed permission." Her words weren't rehearsed or smoothed over. They cut through. raw and direct. "I'm not here to shame Karoline Leavitt," she said. "I'm here to remind everyone watching, you don't need to be flawless to belong. We belong because we live. Here, work here, love here, build here. We belong because our ancestors made it possible." She paused again, letting the silence echo. And if that makes someone uncomfortable enough to say what she did, then maybe that discomfort is theirs to carry. Not mine. She ended the press conference without taking any questions, closed her folder, walked away like she had better things to do, and she did. Her phone rang almost immediately, calls from supporters, some crying, some cheering, even political opponents texted, "You said what I've never been able to say out loud." But not everyone applauded. Some were already planning a backlash one. That would challenge everything. Jasmine had just stood up for by noon. Clips of her words were everywhere that mattered. Millions watched them before lunch. Some replayed them, not because they missed it, but because they needed to feel it again. Across the country, reactions poured in, not in tweets or slogans, but in stories. In real voices. In a small diner near Toledo, Ohio, an older black man named Reggie sat in a booth he'd claimed for decades. He leaned over his coffee and said to the waitress, "I didn't even know her name before today, but that woman's got steel in her spine." In Flagstaff, Arizona, a Navajo high school teacher paused her class, played the clip on the projector, and let her students sit in silence. Then she said, "That's how you carry yourself when they try to cut you down." And in Fresno, California, a retired white veteran named Bill logged into Facebook for the first time in over a year. He posted one sentence. She spoke for more than just herself. Still, not everyone saw it that way. Conservative radio wasted no time spinning the story. One radio host in Des Moines leaned into the mic. "This is just another staged move to play the victim and divide us. She's putting on a show." Callers chimed in, some agreed. Others pushed back. She didn't overreact. One caller said, "She spoke the truth." If that bothers you, maybe ask yourself why. Carolyn stayed quiet. Her team issued a new statement, this one longer, and more carefully worded. It expressed regret if her words had been misunderstood, but still stopped short of a full apology. Online, the moment was dissected relentlessly. That night, Carolyn paced inside a borrowed townhouse in Arlington, Virginia, windows shut, lights off. She watched the clip again. Jasmine's delivery. Her calm intensity. "She's winning this," Carolyn murmured from the kitchen. Her aide Brian gave a quiet nod. "You're not talking your way out of this. Not this time." "I didn't mean it that way," Carolyn whispered. "It just slipped." Brian leaned against the counter. That's exactly the problem. Elsewhere, the fallout kept growing. On a college campus in Madison, Wisconsin, students packed an auditorium meant for a completely different event. It turned into a conversation about identity, belonging, and what it means to truly feel at home in America. Clips of Jasmine's speech played between panelists. In a barbershop in Mobile, Alabama, older men paused haircuts to talk about her composure. "Back in my day," one said, "you got loud or threw a punch." She did neither. That takes more strength than folks realize. But Jasmine felt the weight too. Alone in her apartment. Lights dimmed, glass of water in hand. She hadn't turned on the news. She didn't want to hear strangers talk about her like they understood. Not when they'd never had to hold a kind of silence she carried that day. Her phone buzzed. A message. It was from someone unexpected. Senator Leah Drummond, a conservative from Texas. The message was short. That was powerful. "Can we meet?" Jasmine stared at her screen, not because she was surprised, but because in that moment, everything felt heavier. Her words had stirred something. People were paying attention. Even those who'd never sat across from her now wanted to talk. But one person still hadn't spoken, and when she finally did, it would shift the entire conversation. During a live congressional hearing, Karoline Leavitt muttered the words, "Go back to Africa." She didn't realize her mic was on. What Jasmine Crockett said in response left the room silent, and the country watching. Inside the Kansas state capitol, the air felt dry, charged with tension. Papers rustled. Pens tapped. Quiet murmurs hinted at a hearing that had gone too long and too deep. You could almost feel the discomfort clinging to people's clothes. The subcommittee hearing on education policy had dragged into its third hour. Tempers were flaring, representative. Jasmine Crockett, seated confidently in a blue blazer, had remained mostly quiet, not because she lacked thoughts, but because she was waiting for the right moment. She always did. Across from her sat Karoline Leavitt, once a familiar face on morning TV, now a senior advisor on federal education reform, sharp, ambitious, and never one to back down. But today, she looked tense, defensive. Something about being challenged by a poised black woman struck a nerve when Jasmine finally spoke. Her voice was calm but clear. "So what you're saying," she asked, looking directly at Carolyn, "is that schools in underserved areas just aren't trying hard enough?" Carolyn crossed her arms, shifted in her seat. "I'm saying standards must be applied equally, no special treatment." Jasmine didn't flinch, but the playing field was never equal, she replied. "Steady. We can't talk about fairness without talking about access. Context matters, and so does history." Carolyn scoffed softly, but her mic was still on. Then it happened. She leaned slightly to the left. Not straight into the microphone, but close enough. Her words came through, unmistakable. "She should just go back to Africa." A pause, a cough. Papers shuffled. Someone in the back of the room cleared their throat. At first, it didn't seem to register. Until a young black intern at the media table stiffened. He turned slowly toward the speaker. C-SPAN's feed was still live. A few people glanced at Jasmine. They expected her to rise, to shout, to walk out, but she didn't. Instead, she kept her hands clasped. She blinked slowly and waited. The subcommittee chair, an older man from Idaho, cleared his throat. "Let's stay on topic, please." Carolyn didn't react. She calmly reached for her water bottle and took a sip, as if nothing had happened, but her ears were flushed. That's when she realized the mic had picked up her offhand comment. The clip was already making its rounds, being clipped and captioned behind the scenes. Jasmine met her eyes directly, not upset, not shaken, just steady. It was the kind of look that said, "You didn't hurt me. You just revealed yourself." Still, she said nothing. She turned back to her notepad, jotted down a quick note, and let the meeting proceed as usual. Those 10 seconds said more than any speech could have. But silence doesn't stay quiet for long. Not when a mic is hot and the nation is listening. A week passed, but the moment kept gaining momentum. It reached people who rarely followed politics. Truckers catching the replay on the radio near Wichita. Teenagers analyzing it in group chats between classes in Eugene, Oregon. That moment had tapped into something deeper, not just about race, but about respect, about how quickly we dismiss others and how rare it is to see someone stay composed without clapping back on live TV. Roundtables followed. Analysts dissected Jasmine's response, Caroline's apology, and everything in between. Some called it a lesson in grace under pressure. Others thought Jasmine let Carolyn off too easy. A late-night commentator remarked, "There was no shouting, no drama, yet somehow that made it more powerful." She didn't respond with outrage. She answered with clarity. Still, not everyone accepted the apology. In Birmingham, civil rights activist Lori Price went live on social media. "This isn't just about words," she said. "It's about what's behind them." An apology doesn't mean much if the culture that shaped those words stays the same. Meanwhile, in her quiet office, Jasmine read through stacks of handwritten letters, hundreds of them. One stood out. It was from a fifth-grade girl in Boise, Idaho, who'd drawn a picture of Jasmine at a podium. The caption read, "You talk like my mom, calm but strong." That letter stayed on Jasmine's desk, but she knew the praise could fade as quickly as it arrived. Later that week, she spoke with a small group of interns. No cameras, no scripts. Don't aim to go viral. She told them, aim to move forward. This town eats up the loudest voice in the room. You win by being steady, honest, human. Carolyn, on the other hand, was still trying to climb back. Her statement had softened a few critics, but many weren't convinced. Protesters showed up at one of her events in Sioux Falls, carrying signs that read, "Words have weight." That night, alone in her hotel room, Carolyn stood at the mirror wiping off her makeup. She looked tired. Brian, her aide, scrolled through the latest headlines. "You still planning to do more interviews?" She shook her head. "I think I need to listen before I speak again." It wasn't surrender. It was something different, maybe the beginning of accountability. Maybe just the sting of facing consequences. Either way, something had shifted. Not a complete transformation, but at least a disruption. Eventually, the media moved on, as it always does. A new scandal in another state took over the spotlight. And the pundits changed course, but something lingered, not on front pages, but in kitchens, in office break rooms, in casual conversations where someone would say, "Did you see that speech?" And the other person would nod, "Yeah." She said what needed to be said. At the airport in Santa Fe, a woman in a TSA uniform stopped Jasmine gently. "You reminded us what power can be." "Quiet." Jasmine smiled. "Thank you," she replied. "I didn't think it would reach this far." The woman nodded. It did. Not every story ends with fireworks. Sometimes, it's the calm after the storm that stays with you. Even stillness holds strength. If people are willing to sit with it and ask what it's really teaching them. 2 months later, everything seemed back to normal. Congress was in session, the news had moved on, and the talk was all about midterms, border bills, or the latest scandal from someone half the country didn't vote for. But underneath the noise, something had shifted. In Charleston, South Carolina, a civics teacher opened her fall semester differently. Instead of diving into the Constitution, she played a clip of Jasmine's press conference. Then she asked a simple question: "What does it mean to belong?" A student in the back raised her hand. "It means you don't have to explain why you're here." That answer stayed with her. Back in D.C., Jasmine Crockett didn't become a household name. She didn't land on magazine covers or go on book tours. What she did gain was a growing list of young staffers asking to join her team, not because she was the loudest voice, but because she said something that stayed with people. She also noticed a change in the halls. People she'd hardly spoken to began nodding in greeting. One congressman from Billings, Montana, stopped her and said, "You didn't just speak for yourself, you spoke for people who've never had the mic." Jasmine paused, then smiled. That was the point. As for Karoline Leavitt, she stepped out of the spotlight on purpose. No media tours, no podcasts, no emotional interviews. Just work, steady, quiet work. She met with advocacy groups behind closed doors, not for show, but to listen. One of those meetings was in Columbus, Ohio, with a local youth group focused on civic dialogue. A college student asked her directly, "What changed for you?" Carolyn didn't avoid the question. Getting caught didn't change me, she said. Being challenged did, and I'm still figuring out what that means. No applause followed. It wasn't needed. That wasn't the point. Later that fall, a quiet vote passed on a bill to improve equity in federal school funding. Jasmine co-sponsored it. Carolyn supported it too. They didn't stand side by side. There was no photo op, no big reconciliation moment, but they voted the same way. That detail didn't make headlines. It wasn't flashy, but for those paying attention, it mattered. What happened in that hearing room wasn't just about a comment. It was about who we choose to be when we're tested. Jasmine didn't walk away with more fame. She walked away with more weight behind her words, the kind that stays even when the cameras are off. And Carolyn didn't become a villain. She became a mirror, forcing people to ask themselves, how many times have I said something in the dark I wouldn't say in the light? The truth is, this wasn't a scandal story. It was a story about choice, the choice to speak up without shouting, to teach without tearing someone down, to respond without turning someone into a mistake. At a time when everyone's expected to pick sides, Jasmine chose something else, clarity over noise, and that choice left a mark deeper than outrage ever could. Some political moments fade fast. This one didn't, because people don't forget when someone shows strength without cruelty. They remember the pause, the breath, the way someone stands when the floor shakes, and they don't back down. Maybe that's the lesson. You don't need to yell to make an impact. You just need to be honest when it matters most. If this story made you think, share it. And if you want more stories that speak to who we are and who we're becoming, hit subscribe. We're just getting started.